Cass, if you could avert your gaze from the exotica of the banking world for one moment, you would realise, as so many women in Peckham realise, there is nothing childish about Rodney Trotter. And they would appreciate having a young, vibrant, successful bloke like me about. And they would most probably do me a pie and chips when I felt like it.
Only Fools and Horses, Thursday, 9:35 on 1.
Sam Beckett prepares for a 1954 pool room showdown with the legendary Chicago champion. On 2 shortly.
Very tasty.
The job or the man?
Rise in half an hour.
Now, the 9 o'clock news on BBC One with Martin Lewis.
The government makes another £25 million available to help people on state benefit. A top committee says the social fund system is failing those in greatest need and calls for radical reforms. Grief-stricken Azerbaijanis claim up to 1,000 civilians have been massacred by the Armenians. And the latest ceasefire in Somalia is broken even as it's being signed. Good evening. The government is putting another £25 million into state benefits to help those in greatest need. But a top-level committee has strongly criticised the way the money is spent. The extra cash brings to £75 million this year's additional amount going into the social fund, which is used to allocate loans and grants in cases of particular hardship. The Social Security Minister said it boosted the fund by 30%. Labour accused him of cheap electioneering.
The Social Fund was designed 6 years ago as a cost-cutting safety net for the poor. The Social Security Advisory Committee says it's unfair, relying too often on the discretion of officials and failing to meet many claimants' needs. The fund, which helps people on income support buy furniture and other household items, is cash limited. Each Social Security office has only a certain amount of money to allocate each month, so a family on income support could be refused help in one area because that month's funds had been used up, while a neighbouring office would still have resources to spare. The system of offering loans in many cases instead of grants can also mean that those in greatest need of assistance are turned down because they could not afford the necessary repayments.
What we're getting is a great deal of hardship. We're getting people having to sleep on the floor because they can't get a grant for a bed. We're getting people who are paying so much back in loans that they haven't got enough money left for basic expenses like food.
The SSAC, government appointed but independent, has voiced concern before but never as strongly as this. It says the fund needs a major overhaul. It recommends that grants should be available by right to claimants setting up home in unfurnished accommodation. It says those receiving loans should be allowed to make smaller repayments each week, and more money should be poured into the fund to ensure that local offices don't run short. This afternoon, the government announced that next year's fund budget would be 30% bigger than in the previous 12 months, a total increase of £75 million.
This was all, in a sense, preset in our own public expenditure arrangements for next year. But we obviously look at every report that comes out. We're quite clear that a number of people have criticisms of the social fund. We want to take those seriously and within the resources available make proper provision for this area of exceptional need.
Last week there was a £800 million bribe for private pensions. There were also big increases in public expenditure announced in health, in industry and in transport. And here we have an increase on the $2 billion in the last 3 weeks. It's all about the election.
I think it's welcome, and I think it's very much needed. But when you look at the evidence that's been coming out recently from research institutes which show that something like 2.5 million households are in serious trouble with debt, then I think that that's a measure of the problem that it seeks to address, and it's not enough.
With its response today, the government says it's showing its commitment to the poorest sector of society. The opposition says it's a case of brass-necked bribery on the eve of an election campaign.
Neil Kinnock has said the new system for financing the health service is putting cost before care and betraying the fundamental principle of the NHS. But the Prime Minister said resources were at a record level and the new system was improving health care. He accused Mr Kinnock of bogus compassion.
Neil Kinnock, here meeting charity organisers, can't afford to be charitable to the government. With election fever mounting and the polls moving slightly in his favour, he chose today to combine an attack on Labour's favourite issue, health, with a renewed assault on the government's tax and spending plans. The Prime Minister is inhibited from talking about taxes before next Tuesday's budget, though we'll have noted with irritation the demands from his party's Thatcherite wing that he must not cut income tax at the cost of higher borrowing. Ignoring the actor's rule not to appear with children or animals, he made somebody's day with an autograph. Even those not fighting elections love a camera. In the House, Neil Kinnock quoted a London cardiologist to argue that the new health system puts cash before care.
The right honourable gentleman knows that there is no system that puts cash before care. What the right honourable gentleman also knows is that we have provided more additional resources in this Parliament than the right honourable gentleman himself was even prepared to promise in his last election manifesto.
Neil Kinnock persisted with the cardiologist's anxieties.
Doesn't he have a powerful point when he says that the new system is run by accountants who don't have to sit across the table and say to patients, I cannot treat you until the new financial year?
John Major claimed record health spending and a better system.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is going to borrow to fund tax cuts. Doesn't he understand yet that the priority of the British people is to use all available resources for the health and other essential services? He wants to bribe, they want to build. Why doesn't he listen to them?
The Prime Minister asked where health stood in Labour's priorities.
The right honourable gentleman's priorities don't add up, and he knows it. The right honourable gentleman can't put a cost on his compassion, for it's bogus.
Today, ministers all but finished their work on the Conservative manifesto, and it will go to the printers after one final meeting next week. Most MPs now would like to get on with the election. Although the government needs to get its budget and a few final pieces of legislation through, this Parliament has now run its political course.
The doctor quoted there by Neil Kinnock is a long-standing critic of health service funding. Dr. Graham Jackson, a consultant cardiologist at Guy's in South London, says his criticisms are not about the recent government changes to the NHS. He says a health service needs to be based on symptoms, not money. But tonight, Guy's chief executive said his trust's waiting lists had been cut by 70% in the last year. And he said all emergencies are treated immediately. This report from our social affairs editor, Polly Toynbee.
One Guy's Hospital cardiologist has been complaining to the press for months that his patients are at risk. Now he claims 3 may have died because Guy's has already fulfilled its contract with the local health authority. So local people must wait till April and a new financial year for non-emergency treatment.
There are 3 patients who have died waiting for their investigations, who I would have expected to have been able to offer a therapeutic option. I can't guarantee I'd have made them better or treated them or saved their lives, but I would like those patients to have had a chance.
However, emergency treatment is still available for anyone a doctor says is in danger and needs admitting within 24 hours. Guy's managers say it's for doctors to detect those at risk. Ministers and managers accuse Dr. Jackson of shroud waving, frightening patients in order to demand more money for his own speciality. The chief executive said he was investigating the cases.
Our concern is not to unduly make patients feel that they are at risk as a result of being on our waiting lists. Dr. Jackson is essentially making the point he doesn't think there are enough funds in the National Health Service. I think he could have found a different way of expressing that point of view without unnecessarily alarming patients.
NHS funds have always been limited with some form of rationing. The old system rationed treatments with long waiting lists and sudden ward closures. The new system rations by sticking to a fixed number of contracts. There are always places where rationing bites hardest, among them cardiac waiting lists, where non-urgent cases can unpredictably turn into emergencies.
Two former soldiers of the Ulster Defence Regiment have been jailed for life for their involvement in the murder of a Catholic man. The court heard they'd passed information about Lachlan McGinn to loyalist paramilitary groups. Sentencing Andrew Brown and Andrew Smith, the judge warned that those who set up victims for assassination are as guilty as those who fire the fatal shot.
Brown and Smith were sentenced to life imprisonment at Belfast Crown Court for passing on information to loyalist paramilitaries about Lachlan McGinn, a murder victim of the outlawed Ulster freedom fighters. He was shot dead at his home in County Down, his killers climbing in through a window and following him through the house till they shot him. A few days later, a BBC reporter was shown what was claimed to be security force material, including a picture of Mr. McGinn among IRA suspects, an attempt by the terrorists to justify the killing. That led to the inquiry by the then Deputy Chief Constable of Cambridgeshire, John Stevens, into allegations of leaks from the security forces to loyalist paramilitaries. 4 men in all were convicted for their parts in the murder, but the judge said the prosecutions would make known to the paramilitaries that those who set up victims for assassination were as guilty in the law as the gunman who fired the fatal shot. Tonight, the implications of this case are twofold. For the security forces, the message is that no one's above the law. But for a large section of the Catholic community, it's reinforced the image of the UDR as a force biased against them, something that won't be dispelled by inquiries or court cases.
Despite continuing violence in Somalia, the two main warring factions have put their names to a ceasefire agreement. There have been other ceasefires, but this is the first to be brokered directly by the United Nations. The signing took place in the capital Mogadishu, but was broken immediately by shelling. Our correspondent Jeremy Bowen is in Mogadishu.
It was the 11th ceasefire agreement in this war, but the first to be arranged by the UN. James Jonah, the UN mediator, secured the signature of Ali Mahdi, the interim president, after days of negotiation. A few minutes later, this. A shell landed on a building a few hundred yards from Ali Mahdi's headquarters. At least one man was mortally injured. It's impossible to say whether it was aimed deliberately at the headquarters building, but it's a well-known landmark and everyone in Mogadishu knew what was happening there today. There are killers who are out of control on both sides here. Later, General Adid, from whose sector the shell was fired, signed the agreement as well. It's anyone's guess whether it will stop the war. The omens aren't good. Earlier, as we toured the city, it was clear that the people who still live in the center of Mogadishu don't have a chance if the ceasefire fails. They're beyond helping themselves, and Western charities can do very little in this violent city. This feeding center is right on the front line in central Mogadishu. It's been hit by bullets and shells many times. A little while ago, this projectile came to rest just a few yards from the children inside. But this center, which feeds 250 children every day, has never closed. They've ignored the artillery, and the people have never stopped coming. This 1-year-old girl, called Sadir, has the tired eyes of a child who is being killed by hunger. She's too weak to swallow her mother's milk. Sadir needs special care in a hospital, which she won't get if shelling stops her mother crossing the city. For every child fed here, there are tens of thousands of others who get no extra food, who eat only when their parents can scavenge something from the wreckage. The tiny minority of mothers who have reached the feeding center still face a terrible dilemma. The only hope for them all is a ceasefire, because if the fighting doesn't stop, the bullets will kill them, even if hunger does not. Jeremy Bowen, BBC News, Mogadishu.
The latest pictures from Nagorno-Karabakh show there has been a massacre of Azeris. There are still no reliable estimates of casualties, but Azerbaijan claims Armenian forces killed up to 1,000 civilians when they recaptured the village of Khozali last week. The Armenians say the casualties were caught in crossfire when the Azeris fled to Agdam. The dispute over Nagorno-Karabakh has left the Muslim Azeris controlling only the strategically important town of Shusha, while the Christian Armenians have their stronghold in nearby Stepankert, the capital.
The dead were scattered high on the mountains. They'd been trying to flee from Hujali to the town of Agdam when they were, according to survivors, caught in an Armenian ambush, a column of refugees cut down by gunfire. Police here in Agdam told me today that 120 bodies have been retrieved so far, but the Azeris claim as many as 1,000 of their people may have died. Such figures are hard to verify, but there's little doubt there has been a massacre of innocent civilians. From the bodies I've seen here, some victims had been shot at close range, and some of the corpses had been horribly mutilated. Relatives have been up in the mountains retrieving their dead, and we were told that 27 of the bodies have now been buried in Agdam. In their grief, Azeris are blaming their own president, Ayaz Mutalibov. They say he failed to send sufficient forces to defend the refugees, and that he promised help but didn't get it here in time. Many of those who fled to Agdam and survived are suffering from frostbite. Some had been in the mountains for several days in freezing temperatures. Armenian representatives say they regret the deaths of innocent civilians, but they're trying to justify the attack on Hojali.
They've destroyed 80% of Stepanakert. The Armenians living there had two options, either to wait until they were all killed or to try to silence these rocket launchers.
The civil war in and around Nagorno-Karabakh, which has been raging for 4 years, now looks like it will escalate as Azeris seek vengeance for what they say is an atrocity committed in cold blood against women and children. Both Armenia and Azerbaijan are members of the Commonwealth of Independent States, but it seems powerless to stop the carnage here, and so do international mediators. Troops of the former Soviet Union are pulling out of Nagorno-Karabakh now, but even as they try to withdraw today, they came under attack. One soldier was killed. But once they have gone, Azeris and Armenians will effectively be left to fight it out. Ben Brown, BBC News, Agdam in Azerbaijan.
The government is expected to press ahead with its education bill, despite defeat in the Lords last night on two vital clauses. The Education Secretary, Kenneth Clarke, said he still believes the bill will become law before the election. The Lords' amendments centred on the role of school inspectors. Currently, there are 480 centrally appointed inspectors carrying out school visits and giving policy advice. Local authorities also appoint 3,000 of their own inspectors or advisors. The new bill aimed to reduce the number of central inspectors, giving them a new role vetting a register of inspectors. School governing bodies would have chosen their own inspectors from competing private teams, and local authorities would have lost the right to inspect schools.
A commitment to parents' power is seen by the government as a potential vote winner, and the cornerstone of their parents' charter was the proposal to allow schools to appoint their own inspectors. Plans to publish league tables of school exam results are almost as controversial, and they are still likely to become law.
My Lords, the duty in Clause 9, subsection 1, to arrange...
A minister in the Lords warned that voting for the two amendments would tear the heart out of the bill, and that's what happened. In a classic and well-planned parliamentary ambush, the opposition turned up in force and trounced the government. They're cock-a-hoop and say the government must now drop the proposal.
This bill to privatise a schools inspectorate was always a piece of political madness by Kenneth Clarke. It's made them even more unpopular on education. Nobody understands how privatising the inspectorate, allowing schools to pick and choose and pay their own inspectors, could do anything but damage standards.
I think it will be seen as very bad news by Conservative Party ideologists, but it will be seen as very good news in just about every school and college across the whole country.
Kenneth Clarke, who's furious with government whips in the Lords, was at an election strategy meeting this morning, and it's the election that's his problem. If ministers have decided on April the 9th, there's precious little parliamentary time left to overturn the decision in the Commons. Mr Clarke will have to compromise.
Well, we have to decide by the time the bill next comes from the House of Lords how it's going to proceed now, sensibly, on its way to the statute book. My principal determination is to make sure we have independent inspections of quality reporting to the parents, and I intend to get a sensible bill as an Act of Parliament on the statute book.
Ministers say they're still deciding what to do about this upset. In theory, they could try to persuade the Lords to change their minds next week, but that would be highly unusual. It's more likely they'll accept defeat, arguing that what's left of the bill is worth having.
The president of Bosnia-Herzegovina has said he now expects speedy international recognition of the new republic. A referendum at the weekend produced an overwhelming vote for independence from what remains of Yugoslavia, and the capital, Sarajevo, is reported to be peaceful tonight. From there, Martin Bell reports.
Even as the shooting ended, the people of Sarajevo surged onto the streets in their thousands to celebrate the end of a very short conflict. It had lasted for less than a day. The Serbs agreed to leave their barricades, and the citizens of the capital, mostly Muslims, were demonstrating for peace and Bosnia and no more barricades. But it had been a close-run thing, and even among those demonstrating, there were doubts about the leadership that had let it happen. Today, the traffic was rolling as if nothing had happened, but the Serbs' show of force was deliberate and can be repeated. It was almost civil war, said the commander of their barricades. Their demands were met, but they could seize 65% of Bosnia in half an hour. But the government is pressing on, today announcing the result of the referendum, which in part touched the whole crisis off, 62% for independence. Bosnia's president, Alija Izetbegovic, called for the immediate recognition of his republic by the European community. And already in the old Turkish quarter, they're beating out the trappings of a nation-state, a coat of arms in copper. What they have yet to fashion is a deal that the Serbs can live with. Martin Bell, BBC News, Sarajevo.
The government has announced that it's awarding a defence contract worth £500 million to British Aerospace. The contract is for a new air-to-air missile system. The decision is a blow for the electronics company GEC Marconi, which was the other main contender for the contract. But British Aerospace believes the work will help secure 1,000 jobs. The company said last month it was shedding over 2,000 workers because of defence cuts. President Bush has said he made a mistake raising taxes after promising not to during his election campaign 4 years ago. He's come under fire for the tax increase from his right-wing rival, Pat Buchanan, who's expected to make another strong showing in today's Republican primary in Georgia. At the same time, the president announced that he'd meet the Russian leader Boris Yeltsin for talks in Washington in June.
Mr. Bush's campaign plans are now truly presidential. En route to a formal speech to evangelical groups in Chicago, he announced something no challenger can match, a June superpower summit with Boris Yeltsin. But under constant battering for raising taxes despite an election pledge otherwise, he all but agreed with Ronald Reagan that that was the worst mistake of his presidency.
Well, I don't know about the biggest, but yes, I'm very disappointed with Congress. I thought this one compromise, and it was a compromise, would result in no more tax increases. And so I'm disappointed, and given all of that, yes, a mistake.
The president's admission may help diffuse the election's most damaging charge, that his read my lips, no new taxes promise 4 years ago was a joke. But his right-wing challenger, Pat Buchanan's campaign keeps rolling along. Buchanan is looking for more than a third of the vote in Georgia today, and polls say he'll get it. Meanwhile, for the Democrats, the stakes are just as high. Bill Clinton must win Georgia today or his campaign is sunk, and Paul Tsongas may well win Maryland and Colorado, allowing him to claim at last he is a truly national candidate and definitely the front runner. Gavin Esler, BBC News, Washington.
Campaigners for Scottish Home Rule have urged Scots to vote tactically at the general election for any party supporting devolution. They want voters to support candidates with the best chance of beating the Conservatives, the only party opposed to a Scottish Assembly. The Conservatives say they'll be watching to make sure the campaign doesn't break electoral law. The opposition parties say they don't support tactical voting.
In what amounts to the first organised attempt to turn the election in Scotland into a referendum on Home Rule, the campaign for a Scottish Assembly has urged voters to abandon traditional party loyalties. In the 9 marginal Tory seats north of the border, it wants Scots to vote for the party which came second last time, whether it be Labour, the Liberal Democrats or the SNP.
The great majority of the Scottish people want a Scottish Parliament. We're asking them to vote for candidates who all support Home Rule in one form or other against candidates who are totally opposed to it.
But the Conservatives, the only party against Home Rule, have threatened legal action if the CSA spends money on its campaign in breach of electoral rules.
We will watch very carefully what they're doing, and if there's any question at all of them infringing the Representation of the People Act over the question of expenses, the appropriate action will be taken.
During their pre-election campaign, Labour have often accused the Tories of trying to split the Home Rule vote by seeking to present voters with a stark choice between the constitutional status quo and independence. Tactical voting would undermine those efforts, but there's little support for it among opposition parties.
I certainly believe people should vote for the party whose policies they support. And if they do, then I believe the Labour Party will do extremely well.
People will want to cast their vote in the most effective way possible, and that's not necessarily going to be how they're advised to do so by outside bodies, but they can make their own judgments in their constituencies.
Let's assume we get rid of the 9 Tory MPs in Scotland, but John Major wins the election and Scotland's still in the United Kingdom. What difference will that make? He will then send up English Tories to man the Scottish office, and we won't have a Tory-free Scotland, we'll have an English, Tory-dominated Scotland.
The campaign for a Scottish Assembly is saying publicly what some politicians in private admit to be the case, that however many Home Rule MPs are returned at the next election, the prospects of self-government in Scotland will depend on the strength of the Scottish Conservative Party.
The economy of the Falkland Islands has undergone major changes in the 10 years since the Falklands War. The island's biggest source of revenue has traditionally come from wool, but now new industries are taking its place. Our correspondent Brian Hanrahan reports now on how the islands are facing up to the economic challenges of the 90s.
The latest invasion is friendly. Every year Stanley Harbour fills with fishing boats hoping to catch squid. What they pay in licence fees amounts to 10 times the entire Falklands budget before the war. A team of fisheries inspectors protects the island's interests, backed up by patrol boats and light aircraft. They check the boats, known as jiggers, and enforce conservation measures intended to keep this lucrative industry afloat. New money is building new houses. Along the inelegant but appropriately named Squid Row is the evidence of a new commercialism.
Before the war, there wasn't even a bank here. There was no need. People either worked for the government or the Falkland Island Company. Effectively, they did what they were told. What the war did was to start islanders thinking for themselves. It sparked off a change in social attitudes which have revolutionized the way the islands are run.
The biggest change is to the Falkland Islands Company. Once its boats were the only link with the world, carrying the wool out and supplies in. It owned the farms, the stores, the jetties, the transport. But now it's sold off its land and the rest is up for offers. But it's a bad time for wool, the island's staple industry. The government subsidises every fleece. The wool trade is the last casualty of the Cold War. With the Soviet army no longer buying wool for greatcoats, the world market has collapsed. But the farmers, now working for themselves, say they're cutting costs and rising to the challenge, instead of collapsing under it.
The conflict, though no one wanted it, has opened the world up to the Falklands, and the Falklands are now going ahead, whereas they were going backwards.
War put the spotlight on the islands. It gave them the political muscle to extend territorial waters and create a fishing industry. Now the jiggers subsidise the sheep. Brian Hanrahan, BBC News, on the Falkland Islands.
Football fans may like to know that Leeds United look unlikely to get the victory that they need to go top of the First Division. With a few minutes left, they were drawing 0-0 with Aston Villa, a score which leaves them 2 points behind Manchester United. A nail-biting finish for them and for us. That's the 9 o'clock news tonight. Good night.
Good evening from Newsroom South East. Dame Shirley Porter, the former leader of Westminster City Council, could be ordered to pay almost £4 million and banned from holding public office if allegations about misconduct are upheld. The district auditor is investigating claims that council money was spent to ensure a Conservative victory in local elections.
The allegations against Dame Shirley Porter are highlighted in a front-page article in The Guardian. It claims a top-level inquiry by the District Auditor is likely to criticise the former leader of Conservative-controlled Westminster Council. The inquiry was set up 2 years ago to investigate allegations that the council spent millions of pounds on selling council homes in marginal wards to try to secure Conservative victory in the 1990 local government elections. Dame Shirley today dismissed the Guardian article, saying it was the usual mishmash of misinformation and disinformation.
Computer users have been warned to take steps to protect their machines from a deadly electronic virus that could wipe the information from the system. The virus, called Michelangelo, is due to be activated later this week.
Michelangelo is one of hundreds of so-called viruses currently attacking computer operators who fail to take protection. Imported from abroad and passed around on floppy disks, it wipes the information stored in the computer. Scotland Yard says it's not illegal to write a virus program, but it is to put it into another computer. Targets in Britain have included the Royal National Institute for the Blind, who had files wiped 2 years ago. Police say one solution is to install special programs to avert the problem. Michelangelo is due to strike on Friday, the birth date of its namesake.
The governors of Stratford School in East London tonight postponed voting a motion of no confidence in the head teacher, Anne Snelling. Mrs Snelling was not present. That's all from Newsroom South East. Now here's the weather forecast with Bernard Davey. Good evening.
Good evening. Today was a very mild day on many parts of the country, especially in the east, from eastern Scotland right down to East Anglia. We found temperatures as high as 15, and up here in the northwest of England, North Wales, they also had temperatures 15 to 16. Colwyn Bay being the warmest place, and no reason why we won't see temperatures as high as that tomorrow. The orange shading, 12 to 15, orange is 16, 9 to 12 for the greens, but in East Grampian once again we could see temperatures as high as 14 or 15. But it won't be all plain sailing, because this band of cloud will give some heavy bursts of rain, especially in northwestern Scotland throughout the next 24 hours or so, perhaps some of it getting into Northern Ireland. And further south we have a band of cloud moving north, thick enough to give the odd spot of drizzle. On the rainfall radar, a few hours ago there was just some patchy rain around, and then we had some heavier bursts working its way across Scotland into western Scotland. That'll clear away, but we expect more heavy rain into northwestern Scotland later in the night. Further south, just patchy drizzle. The cloud may break for a time, but it's likely to fill in again with low cloud, a bit of mist, and perhaps one or two fog patches further north over the hills. Tomorrow's weather chart: high pressure to the southeast, low pressure to the north, the front in between, moving in and out of Scotland and Northern Ireland, and when it does, it'll bring some heavier bursts of rain. Quite windy, possibly with gales, but mild, temperatures between 10 and 12. Then further south, though it may start off dull with a bit of mist, it will brighten up, especially in eastern and central areas, with some sunshine coming through, and that'll be enough to lift the temperatures as high as 15. During Thursday, the weather front will start to work its way across the country. It'll be taking its rain with it, though it may start off dry and bright in East Anglia and the southeast. The rain in the south fairly light and patchy. Further north, one or two heavier bursts. Then we have a bright interlude with some sunshine before we hit the showers in the northwest, some of them heavy with hail, perhaps even the odd rumble of thunder, and quite blustery too. And then during Friday, many eastern and southern areas starting off bright, more wet and windy weather spreading in from the west with gales in places. Good night.
Take one adolescent, her journalist mum, and an environmentally friendly gran. Ingredients for family harmony in Us Girls.
Oh, don't stop, Mom. I grew up in times when even coconut shell, the last thing you do is throw it away. You make it into a soup dish, a washing bowl, or crash helmet.
I don't know you ecologically aware, Gran.
I am always logical. That is what your mother don't understand.
Recipe for laughter. Us Girls on the menu this Thursday, 8:30 on 1. Film 92 tonight unveils Martin Scorsese's Cape Fear.
Granddaddy used to handle snakes in church. Granny drank strychnine. I guess you could say I had a leg up. Genetic was bacon.
A Film 92 special in 50 minutes.
First on 1, the minicab girls face foul tactics from a fierce opposition to their rides.